Good afternoon, everyone. It is 12 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started with the Columbus Area Chamber of Commerce's 2020-2021 annual celebration. As you may know, my name is Dawson Brunswick. I was honored and blessed to be selected by the hiring committee to be the new president of the Columbus Area Chamber of Commerce. A little over a month on the job, and this has just been a great experience so far. I'm grateful to the hiring committee, I'm grateful to the board, and truly just grateful to the community for allowing me to come join you here in Columbus. With that being said, I will go now through and introduce our board members. Board members, I would ask that you wave to the camera as I go through your names. The 2020-2021 chair, Ken Curry, representing Nebraska Public Power District. The 2021-2022 chair, Chad Van Cleve, representing Columbus Community Hospital. Your 2021-2022 chair-elect, Todd Durham, representing Loop Power District. Bill Flint, who serves as our treasurer. Jake Gable, representing Commonwealth Electric Company. Dr. Kathy Fuscher, representing Central Community College's Columbus campus. Renee Mueller, representing KW Elite Real Estate. Samir Anteria, representing Cargill. Frank Steffensmeyer, representing Great Western Bank. Michelle Steerick, representing Shred Monster. Dr. Travis Tessendorf, representing Tessendorf Chiropractic. And Carlos Velasquez, representing Pacific Window Tint. I'd also like to recognize our outgoing board member, Jeff Anuka, representing SCOTUS Central Catholic, as well as our two oncoming board members, Dr. Aaron Plauz, representing Lakeview Community Schools, and Curtis Loosefelt, representing Mead Lumber. I also take the opportunity to highlight our community partners. We have ex officios that are very important to the board and truly make the chamber what it is. And those ex officio board members are City of Columbus Mayor Jim Bulkley, Platte County Supervisor Jerry Engdahl, Bernie Hansen with the Nebraska Department of Labor, and Karina Perez representing Centro Hispano. Aside from our board members, there are several other people that we would like to honor and recognize here today. The first of which are our Chamber Commodores. If you're a Commodore with your camera on, please give the camera a wave. We're very grateful for our Commodores. They are the goodwill ambassadors of the Chamber. They were just at a Commodore call this morning, so they're working double time today for us. This past year with COVID though, we didn't have a Commodore of the Year. So I'd like to take this time to recognize Commodores who have served 20 or more years as Commodores and are now emeritus status. And those Commodores are Dick Casey with Balin Manufacturing, Bud Fleischer with Columbus Bank and Trust, Connie Helbush with Duo Lift Manufacturing Company, Rich Jablonski with ARL Credit Services, Cindy Jarecki with Hy-Vee Food Store, Linda Lemp with First Nebraska Bank, Karen Rieger with Central Community College, Columbus Campus, Jim Bader, Pat Hymas, Sony Osternhub, and Whitney Walgreen. Next, I'd like to honor our Chamber Admirals, who are also very valuable to our organization. They do not have emeritus status, I was told, but they are very valuable and we appreciate their service to the Chamber. And then lastly, the committee members that we have. If you're a committee member, we thank you for your service and thank you for the impact you have on our community. And then lastly, our great diamond sponsors that make the Chamber run to a completely new level. And those are the Columbus Telegram, Pinnacle Bank, and Loop Power District. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for being with us today. I'll now turn over the floor to our 2020-2021 Chairman, Ken Curry.
Thank you, Dawson. It's a privilege to have you here. Welcome, everybody. Again, my name is Ken Curry. Good to see you all, kind of. I wish I could physically see you. The neat thing was we did have a board meeting this week and this table was full. So we're getting back to the way we should be, which is great. Needless to say, this last year was a unique one. Many of the gatherings that we all thoroughly enjoy, we were not able to do. But looking forward to this coming year where we all can get together and appreciate this great community. I would like to raise up a couple highlights though. We had Columbus Public Schools stepped forward to help us with the red, white kaboom this last summer. It was definitely at a time where we needed something to celebrate, and we appreciate the public school system providing their facility and providing us ample space to get away from each other, but get together. So thank you, Columbus Public Schools. We were very successful with a virtual Taste of Columbus. We hit our goal. We had a tremendous community partner, Central Community College, raised funds for them. Again, very successful in a unique way. We also had a lot of great work from our chamber team related to COVID and education and working with our businesses to keep the community strong. And the neat thing is we have a great community, and you all know that. We also, and I also, share appreciation for Jean Schieffer's leadership as the president of the chamber. She decided she wants to do something different, something like write a book and be a grandma. I don't get it, I get it. But that we appreciate Jean. I've always appreciated Jean. But we look forward to the next chapter with Dawson and his wife, Taylor, and their dog, Luca DeLuca, I think it is. But we welcome them to this great town. Last but not least, you all, the area businesses, we have a tremendous community. You know it, and we're strong together. We're founded on collaboration, and a lot of that glue of collaboration comes back to the chamber's work. So it's a privilege. It has been a privilege to support the chamber in this role and this community. So with that, let's move on to the celebration. And at this time, I'd like to recognize the 25-year members of the Columbus Area Chamber of Commerce. And this would be 25 years for those if we were celebrating last year. So go back a year. 2020, 25 years. We recognize 3E. We recognize Brown Shoe Fit, Cargill, Copper Care Wood Preservatives, Community Internet Systems, Duster's Restaurant and Gottberg Brew Pub, Ferringer and Melock, Jay's Body Shop, Rotary, Sleep In, Twin River Vet Clinic, and Nebraska Vocational Rehabilitation. Congratulations on 25 plus 1, 26 years with the Chamber. And again, thank you for the support of the Chamber of Commerce. At this time, I'd like to recognize current 25-year recipients: Columbus Small Animal Hospital, Cornerstone Bank, Cruz and Associates, FDC Publishing, Nebraska Energy Federal Credit Union, Pet Care Specialists, Sears Hometown Store, and Veterans of Foreign Wars, Post 3704. Thank you again, and congratulations on 25 years with the Chamber. And at this time, 50 years is a tremendous accomplishment.
We're going through some pictures right now.
Oh, we are going through pictures, so I'm just gonna wait until the pictures get there. Very good. So I'll slow down. This time, recognize our 50-year recipient. And it is one, and this would have been for 2020, Central Community College. Congratulations, Central, and thank you for 51 years with the Chamber. I'd also like to recognize a member that was 50 years this current year, and up on the screen you can see it, Sherwin-Williams, a tremendous community partner and a great paint store, very much so. Congratulations, Sherwin-Williams, for 50 years. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. Kathy Fuscher to announce the 55, 60, 65, and 70-year members.
Thanks, Ken. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I thought 50 years was a milestone, but we have lots to celebrate with folks who have and businesses who have contributed to the Columbus Area Chamber of Commerce for over 55 years. I believe we don't have individual pictures, so if you'll just stay with me, I'll read off of our names so that you know who we are celebrating. To recognize our members who reached 55 years in 2020, Cameco, Columbus Manufacturing, and Noyes Rogers. To recognize our members who are 55 years in 2021, congratulations, Gilmore and Associates Incorporated. Those members who have reached 60 years in the year 2020 include Ernst Auto Group. And for members who reached 60 years in 2021, Midwest Glass. We do have a member who reached 65 years of commitment to the Columbus Area Chamber of Commerce in 2020. That would be Center 7 Theaters. And one member who reached 70 years of commitment, excuse me, two members who reached 70 years of commitment in 2020, BD Medical Systems, and also Weber Insurance Agency Incorporated. That's our list. We are so grateful for our 55, 60, 65, and 70-year members. Let me turn it back to Todd Duran, who is our chair-elect, and he will introduce our 85 and 95-year members. Todd?
Thank you, Kathy. Sorry about that. A little struggle getting unmuted, but yeah, I'd like to recognize our members for 85 and 95 years. What an accomplishment and what a commitment to the chamber and the community. So let's start with the members who have reached 85 years in 2020, and that would be Columbus Bank and Trust, Meade Lumber, and Union Pacific Railroad. I would also like to recognize the members who reached 85 years in 2021, and that would be Balin Manufacturing. And next, let's move on to 95 years, quite a commitment, I would say. So members reaching 95 years in 2020 are Columbus Public Schools, the Columbus Telegram, First National Bank, Insurance Services of Columbus, and McCowan Funeral Home. And one last member who will be reaching 95 years this year in 2021, Jackson Services. I'd like to congratulate all those commitments to the chamber and the community for 85 and 95 years. So thank you very much. With that, I turn it back to Ken to move forward.
Very good. Before I pass it on to Dawson to introduce our guest speaker, I would like to personally express my appreciation for the community and the community partners, the ongoing support for this great community. It's definitely a testimony for the tenure of many of the institutions that we just talked about in this great community. So again, thank you all for the support of the chamber, but more importantly, supporting what we all do in this community to make it a better place. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dawson and he can introduce our guest speaker.
Perfect. Well, our guest speaker today is Brian Sloan, the president of the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And as I say, he's hopping into the waiting room, so perfect timing. Brian E. Sloan became president of the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce and Industry in May of 2018. A Nebraska native, Brian has lived in several Nebraska communities throughout the state. As an attorney and accountant, Brian brings more than 3 decades of policy and business experience to the state chamber. Prior to his arrival at the chamber, he's a tax attorney with Coley Jessen in Omaha, where he advised business clients on legal matters related to taxation, administrative law, international law, mergers and acquisitions, and government affairs. Before Coley Jessen, he was a Nebraska office managing partner for Deloitte, one of the nation's largest professional services firms. In the 1990s, Brian worked in Berlin, Germany as a tax attorney and co-founding partner for the Wilmer, Cutler, and Pickering law office located there. In the 1980s, Brian spent much time in Washington, D.C., where he was legal advisor to the IRS commissioner and served as a House Ways and Means Committee staff member under former U.S. Representative Hal Dobb of Nebraska. In this capacity, he helped shape the 1986 federal tax law. Brian was also a candidate for governor in 2014. He holds a law degree from the University of Nebraska College of Law and a bachelor's degree in business administration from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Brian and his wife Leslie have 2 adult children, Steve and Lauren. The State Chamber has proudly served as Nebraska's business community since 1912. With approximately 1,200 members statewide, the Chamber's mission is to protect all aspects of the free enterprise system while making Nebraska an even better place to do business. Brian, welcome to our celebration.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be part of this today, and I'm going to give everybody a break. I'm not going to use a PowerPoint. I am zoomed and PowerPointed out of my existence at this point. I do want to talk about tax modernization today because I think that's the next topic that is really up for the state. Give you a little background of kind of how we got here and where this might go, but also just make this as interactive as you want to make it. So feel free to jump in at any point, unmute yourself and jump in, or just send me a note in the chat box if you want to do that, because we'd like to deal with those issues. Obviously, my background is as a tax lawyer, so if you're a hammer, the world is a nail. I think about taxes all the time. Have been involved in President Reagan's tax reform bill years ago, and have been involved in Nebraska tax matters for a long time. But I think it's coming to the forefront, but not in ways that even I expected a couple of years ago. And let me kind of take us all the way back. If you think about Nebraska and how Nebraska evolved as a series of immigrations, basically, beginning in the late 1800s, and you can see it across the state. You can still see it even in Omaha and Lincoln. Waves of Czechs and waves of Irish and waves of Germans and then waves of Swedes. And so, we have Czech capital and Swede capital and German capitals and you name it. And basically, as this state developed, this was the state where any person could come, claim some land, and really start a new life and start new communities. As a consequence, this state, from the very beginnings, has a very strong local control culture, a very significant distrust of Lincoln and sometimes Omaha, but the significant distrust of centralized government in Lincoln. And that goes way back to our territorial governors, some of whom may not have been the most ethical at times. And so even if you read our Nebraska Constitution, it reads as very distrustful of state government. And indeed, most of the Constitution is set up to ensure that local governments still control spending. And even as we sit today, we raise maybe $8.5, almost $9 billion of taxes a year in Nebraska. Out of that amount, half is still raised locally, and far more than half is spent locally. So let's put it in context. $4.5 billion come in primarily income taxes and sales taxes at the state level, and then are appropriated by the legislature. But even out of that, $1.5 billion to $2 billion come back to local governments as state aid to local governments. At the local level, we've got over 2,000 taxing entities at a local level that raise over $4 billion of property taxes during the course of a year. Then you add the state aid, and you're talking about spending maybe $6 billion, $5.5 to $6 billion at the local level. So even the way we're organized today is still very much locally controlled. Now, my mayors and school boards would argue that it's not completely locally controlled, and they'd be correct. There's a lot of federal mandates, there's a lot of state mandates in terms of things they have to do. But just in terms of the actual spending, that's the way we're set up. The tax system itself is very much a antiquated vestige of the way we were. So property tax particularly. Property tax was originally meant to be a wealth tax. It was part of the first taxes that we had in the United States. We didn't have income taxes in the United States until about the 1920s. The federal income tax came in place in 1917. Property tax has been around for a long time. And if you think about why property tax, in terms of taxing wealth, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, wealth was identified with land ownership. Anybody who was wealthy generally did own significant parcels of land. And if you looked at Omaha Plats, there was a number of families that owned very large tracts of land in Omaha. That was true in all the communities. And so land was, even for my father and grandfather and great-grandfather, land was the source of family income and family wealth. So a property tax focused on real property ownership made sense in those days. If you look at wealth today, sometimes it has to do with land ownership, but not always, and certainly not most often. Wealth is derived in a lot of sources at this point, including a lot of intangibles like stock market ownership or like software ownership or things like that. So as a wealth tax, property taxes at this point is focused on a pretty narrow group of people who own Nebraska land, and it's a finite asset, and wealth growth is actually being derived from a lot of other assets. But nonetheless, we still raise over, well, about half of our taxes are taxes on real property. Not surprisingly, farmers, ranchers, homeowners, and even business owners that own lots of real property believe that their property taxes are too high, and they are too high. We're in the top 10 highest property tax states in the country. From an income tax standpoint, the income taxes were meant to tax income, because you could have wealthy people who no longer had incomes, but you could also have people who have incomes and don't have wealth in real property. So it's an equalizer to an extent, but in Nebraska, we have a income tax system which taxes those at the very lowest part of our income strata the least of any state around. We are as favorable from an income tax standpoint to the lowest incomes as any place you could be. But then very quickly, we move to the highest. So beginning at about $36,000 of income, you start paying the same rate as Warren Buffett. And you move very quickly in this state to the highest tax rate, which is 6.84%. Corporations have it worse. Their tax rate is over 7.5%. So we tax corporations at a much higher rate than individuals, which is an oddity, and one of the highest corporate rates in the country. Not the highest, but one of the highest. The only other state in our area that has that high of a corporate rate would be Iowa, and they're working on that at the present time. So our income tax rates are very high. Our sales tax rate is also very high. I shouldn't say very high. It's at the higher end. And when you add city taxes to it, but what we do in sales taxes, we have well over $1 billion of exemptions. There's over the years, 20, 30, 40 years, legislatures passed all sorts of exemptions on sales taxes. So it's a high rate on a I wouldn't say a narrow base, but a modified base, certainly more restrictive base than a full sales tax base. South Dakota would be the example of a state that has a very broad sales tax base. And where we end up is, overall, we are in the bottom half in terms of competitiveness, in terms of taxes overall. We're not the highest tax state, but we're in the top 25, and definitely maybe even in the top 20 highest tax states. That's problematical, because the way out of high taxes is economic growth. Every study you look at, whether it's property taxes or income taxes or sales taxes, tax relief, those states that are accomplishing it are those states that are growing the fastest. Utah is a really clear example of that right now. Several of the largest or the fastest growing cities in the country are in Utah right now. Even closer to home, an example is Sioux Falls. Sioux Falls, South Dakota is growing almost, well, I think this is right. I think they're growing at least twice as fast as any community in Nebraska, including Omaha. And that 0% income tax rate in South Dakota has a lot to do with that, along with some other things that are going on there. And so as we look at our tax code, we've probably reached the point, at least I would argue we've reached the point where we really need to take a clean sheet of paper and say, what's it going to take to make Nebraska competitive at this point? And take a look at this. Generally speaking, people will talk about broadening the base, eliminating a lot of deductions and exclusions, and lowering rates. Generally speaking, from an economic standpoint, that's the most efficient way to tax and to create economic growth. We are a state that likes its services. And I think that's just part of the culture. We like better schools than other states. It's part of our economic development. And so when you talk about taxes and economic development, our largest expenditure from property taxes is obviously schools. And we like having better schools, and better schools make us competitive. So it is what it is. We like our roads better. Actually, if you look at our gross domestic product, our #1 industry in this state is not agriculture, it's government. We tend to have more government employees per capita than almost any other state. And so this is a state that likes its services, but so you juxtapose that against, then how do we reduce taxes and become more competitive? Well, I think several things have to happen to make that work. Basically, we're going to have to increase population growth at a much higher rate. We are a very slow growing state, notwithstanding the article that was in the World Herald. We grew 7% over 10 years, the last decade. That was the best decade we've had in a long time. 7% doesn't create a high growth state. We are in the bottom 10 states in terms of the application of technology and innovation. Hurts our productivity. So when you think about creating a much greater economy to support these services that we want, and whether you're an advocate for schools or whether you're an advocate for reducing taxes, it's still the same. All the data suggests that the only way you accomplish those, for instance, that 50% of the top 10 states that are performing well in education, 50% of them are also the fastest growing GDPs in the country. And so economic growth is as important to school funding as it is to reducing taxes. We need more workers, and they need to be more productive with more technology and innovation. It comes down to that. Any given day in Nebraska, we have 50,000 jobs open that we can't fill because we don't have people. And it's holding back our economic growth. So when we think about a tax system, we need to start thinking about what's it going to take to attract the population that we need and to attract the technology and innovation companies that we need. And frankly, unfortunately for me, that the group of people that we're looking for are not 63-year-old semi-retired accountants and lawyers working at the chamber who probably don't have that long a runway left in terms of work life. Where we really suffer in every county is in the 18 to 30-year-old age group. You can look at the demographics of almost every county in this state, and we hold our own in keeping people in the state except for that group from 18 to 30. And in almost every county in the state, what you will see is as young people graduate from high school, as they graduate from community college, as they graduate from a four-year institution, a very large percentage leave. And for a state that we're sort of banking on, whether it's for property tax relief or education or government spending or infrastructure, whatever you want, we're banking on being able to retain those 18 to 30-year-olds. Something different has to happen. And so from a tax code standpoint right now, if I ask you who's the heaviest taxed overall in the state, you'd probably tell me farmers and ranchers, and I would tell you, no, that's not even in the ballpark. The heaviest taxed people in this state tend to be young people with double incomes. And the reason being is they tend to be buying that first house. So on a fairly low income, they have very significant property taxes. They're two wage earners. And so they're paying that Warren Buffett highest rate of tax on every dollar they make. It's W-2 income, the tax is being withheld. And then from a sales tax standpoint, in terms of percentage of dollars they spend on sales tax that are consumption that is subject to sales tax versus the income they make, they tend to be the highest group of people. So the very people that we need to attract, and the innovators and entrepreneurs and technologists that we need to attract, our tax system just isn't very good at doing that. And I haven't even got to our cell phone taxes. So Nebraska has some of the highest cell phone taxes in the country, as you know. So if you were trying to attract young technologists to this state, sort of the last thing you would do is make sure that they were the highest taxed and that their technology was taxed. And so as we focus on where we go from here, I think it's fair to say this is not the 1800s anymore. This is not the early 1900s. How do we develop a tax system that is as fair as we can make it and is helpful in the process? Taxes alone won't attract young people, but how can we make it so that they can buy a house, they can pay taxes on their wages and on their technology, and not feel like they're a high tax state. And the other one I didn't mention was a car. The other sticker shock young people have when they move here is when they license their car, not only pay the sales tax, but then pay all the taxes that go with that car. Multiples of what it would be if they'd moved to Sioux Falls. And so the question is, to me, do we need tax modernization in this state? That's a foregone conclusion. The question is, can we get out of our way and get past our normal debate, which is property taxes versus education? I think that we've been engaged for 30 to 40 years in a debate around property taxes versus education spending, and it was the wrong debate. I think in those 40 years, neither farmers nor teachers have won. You can't go to any farmer and rancher and say, have you won the property tax debate yet? And they're going to throw up their hands and say yes. In fact, they would say they're worse off than ever. Same thing if you went to teachers and you said, well, you must have won then, and is education where it needs to be, and do our schools have everything they need to really be a top 10 educational state? They would similarly say, not even close. But this whole debate has been characterized wrong, because what we missed in the process was sort of what's our economic growth trajectory and what's our population trajectory. When I first came onto the chamber, we had fewer kids in K through 12 than we had when I graduated from high school in 1975 in Nebraska. If that gives you a sense of what our population growth has looked like. It's gotten better. We've got a lot of kids in kindergarten, first and second grade at this point. So by 2030, we're going to be out of that a little bit. But what we didn't focus on in that whole property tax versus teachers debate over the last 30 or 40 years is how are we going to grow the state, how are we going to grow the population, and how are we going to be an innovation and entrepreneurship state. We rank in the bottom 10, actually I think in the bottom 5 in terms of patents per capita. We're just not producing those new companies. We're going to lose some ConAgras and some Cabela's, just like any other state. The question is, where's that pipeline of companies that's coming up after them? Good example is Huddle in Lincoln. I think that company is going to do great things. But how do we get more of those things? And so I think tax modernization comes in the midst of this. Next year, what's going to happen in the legislature is there will be a proposal that will come probably from Senator Linehan that will propose to broaden the base, lower rates, probably move more into the sales tax arena. We'll see. And then there'll be this furious debate. And unfortunately, the debate will focus on, we'll tax that person over there, but please don't tax me. And it will be politics in its worst. But hopefully, in the end, this is a state that's going to try to be competitive. This is a state that will look like Utah has done the last 4 or 5 years, and there'll be no one bill that automatically fixes this problem, but Utah has been working on it for 5 or 10 years.
Is your January payment.
And it's has been very successful. So I think that's where we're headed. I think next year's legislature will be incredibly interesting as this comes up, and people will learn far more about taxes than they want to. But I think it's important, it's timely. if we're going to compete coming out of this pandemic, which every state is doing, we're going to have to do something very, very different on the tax front. So let me stop there and just take any questions that you might have or get any thoughts that you might have about this.
Any questions from the group?
You guys are easy.
I would just like to, this is Ken, just chime in on the demographic changes. We've had a David Drews from UNO give demographic updates, and many parts of our state are really challenged from the population loss. The good is us here in the Columbus area have held our own. It's kind of the fish hook that runs down through along the interstate and loops back around to us. But you know, as a parent, we all want our kids to come back. And so things we can do in this community to partner, which I think our public schools have done a very good job with industry, and Central Community College, we've got a great asset here, and the chamber can help with some of that. I think that definitely ties to our future. But what you say, Brian, is very sombering but real. So thank you for the information.
Well, I think you hit it on the reason for optimism, and I think Columbus is a really, really good example of this. Every time I come to Columbus, I end up in a meeting with, and it's always got the same kind of group. It's got business, it's got government, it's got education, more than most communities in Nebraska. You all work together, and I think that's sort of been the secret sauce to Columbus over the last 10 years. Is
so my next question, when you're here, do you spend a lot of money?
There's a certain little brew pub down there. On motorcycle, I make a daily contribution to.
Perfect.
But I do think that's the key. Two keys I've seen, because the wonderful thing about my job is you travel the state, and I go to all the communities, and that's why I took this job, because I grew up in small towns around the state, and that's my passion. The ones that are successful have two things. One, exactly what you guys have is this ability to work together across education, across business, across tax exempts, across government, for the betterment of the community. That's rare. And where it works, it's incredible. The other piece of it is, when we're thinking about young people, taxes are one big piece, but the other piece is, what's your front door look like? And when young people look at a community, say what you will, I always say my generation was the generation of moving to the suburbs, buying a big house and filling it full of stuff. That's what my generation did. And I've got a house in the suburbs full of stuff right now. That for my generation, that's how we measured our success. My kids, do they want a big house in the suburbs full of stuff? Not. They want a condo, and they want to travel every weekend. They want to get on a plane and go somewhere and run or ride bikes or go to the mountains or do whatever. And the last thing they want is a big house full of stuff. And so when you look at your community, is your community built for me, or is it built for my kids? Do I have lots of houses where you can put stuff, or do I have places where young people could really live? And a lot of times where they want to live is next to the downtown. And suddenly your downtown becomes your, basically their first impression of your community. And so I'm very excited, for instance, about what Norfolk is doing. So Norfolk is completely redesigning its downtown, and then creating scholarships and internships and everything else to put anywhere from 75 to 150 young people living in their downtown area. As Mike Flood often says, Senator Flood often says, which is probably not politically correct, he said, you'll never get young people to live here in your town unless there's other young people of the opposite sex. And his view is that and it has to be a concentrated group of people so they can actually have a chance to meet. And there has to be venues where they could meet at other than the places that I would go on my motorcycle. And I think he's right. And I think what Norfolk is doing is really good. I think what Broken Bow has done with their downtown has been great. I think North Platte's getting ready to wind up and do this right now. They've got some very cool stuff going on. And we see it in a number of places. And so I think it's taxes alone won't do it. But I think if we get our taxes right, if we start branding the state a little bit better at the state level, those are the two things we can do at the state level. And then at the local level, if we can get the kind of cooperation that you've got in Columbus and get business and government to work together and education, and then do something with our main streets, and really think about what that has to look like. Hastings is another place that has been building lofts like crazy for the last decade. They've got a super restaurant. That's the other thing. The other thing you've got to have, two other things you have to have. You have to have a good restaurant. Surprisingly, all these young people are foodies. You have to have a good restaurant and coffee shop, but you also have to have a place to go in the winter. It's something to do. And there was a study, this is probably 20 years old now, but it's indicative, and I think it's still true. There was a study of small towns across America and why some succeeded and why some didn't. And a statistical study, what was the one thing that was the most important to whether small towns succeeded, and it was bowling alleys. And you say, why bowling alleys? And it was because bowling alleys were a place you could go when it was winter and still get together and have something to do. It doesn't have to be a bowling alley, but that becomes part and parcel. So as a, you know, I think this tax modernization is really important, but it's one piece of that sort of 3 or 4 piece pie.
Well, for those that are not signed up yet, tomorrow there's a great opportunity to help us with our Envisioning Columbus efforts. And call the chamber, because it's very timely. I mean, what do we want this place to look like for our kids and their kids?
Yep. Well,
we need all of the above to be involved in that conversation.
Yep. Well, and you've got a good new chamber leader who fits the demographic we're looking for.
Yeah.
You know, and now if you can just, you know, get him married and make him have 20 kids, we'll be in good shape here.
We got the married thing done, and he's got a dog, so next on the list.
Well, we're on our way. But I do think it's a different outlook. Speaker Hilgers in the legislature would say we need to get out of our normal discussions, political discussions in this state, and we need to come up with 4 or 5 big things we're going to do. And I really think those 4 or 5 big things are tax modernization, rebranding our state, building better recreation for 18 to 34-year-olds. It's year-round recreation, and really putting some money into our Main Street infrastructures. And I think those things would get us 90% of the way there.
And your comments about sticker shock, this is Kathy Pusher, your comments about sticker shock ring true to me. I married and moved to Nebraska 30 years ago, and I remember we had a new car that we had to license when we got here. I'd done it in Missouri and it was no big deal. I did it here and I left the courthouse crying, and went to my husband and said,
Yeah.
What happened? So we have great relationships. We have, opportunities for young people to partner in our communities and grow their families in our communities. But I'm really interested in what is your vision for how we can go about some of this tax modernization?
Well, I think what I want to see us do is pick our goals. And I hope our goals are attracting 18 to 34-year-olds, building our communities, and making sure that we have technology and innovation companies, because that's the other thing for Columbus. The manufacturing community in Columbus is great, but what we need to build on top of that now is a lot more technology and innovation within manufacturing, and we're headed that way, but to create the kinds of jobs that a lot of these kids want to work in. And so as we build the tax code, what I'd love to see is to start with a clean sheet and say, okay, so how would we build a tax code? Well, we'd broaden the base and have lower rates, but we'd probably have incentives for people to move here. We'd probably have incentives for technology applications. We'd probably have low rates of tax for people that develop innovative businesses and sell them. And we'd probably take a hard look. And, you know, the first two things that young people do when they move here is they get a cell phone and register their car. You know, we slap them twice before they, you know, get through their first week. And I think we have to take a hard look and say, is it worth it? Is it worth it? Would we better off to raise that money through basic property taxes or income taxes or sales taxes or what, than to do those things to people?
One takes a little more effort, but it's a long-term payoff.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we've got to market this state. I mean, we live in a state where the state brand is it's not for everybody. You know, can we just do some simple things? And you know, I don't think it's hard because, as you guys know, once you get people here and people never want to leave again. I brought my wife kicking and screaming to Nebraska 30 years ago from Washington, D.C. and Berlin, really kicking and screaming. And it took her about 2 years, and she came to me one night and she said, "We are never leaving, ever, ever, ever." And then a couple of years ago, we had to make a decision about retirement, whether we would get a retirement house somewhere, and we decided not to, because this is it. We'll put up with the snow. This is it.
I do have a question. How are taxes when it comes to somebody who is in the or is a VA or a veteran? I have somebody who's literally moving out of state. They decided to put their house on the market because he said that he can't even live in Nebraska because the taxes are awful with his retirement. He said they're moving to Oklahoma because he said, we didn't go into detail about it at all, but he said he gets taxed like $900 a month on his VA benefits, where if he goes to Oklahoma, it's like 25. He said he can't even live here.
Yep. So the answer is on military retirement, the legislature in the last 2 years has dealt with that. Last year, they exempted 50% of it. This year, they exempted the other 50%. So we actually are solving the retirement benefits. We haven't got the VA benefits piece dealt with yet, but it's a huge issue. So you think about the kind of people that we want for the jobs that are going unfilled. There's no greater group than the military to do that. Iowa has, in the last 5 to 10 years, has basically recruited twice as many military retirees as we have. And that's just not a good situation to be in when we have Offutt sitting right there in Omaha. And so that's sort of a no-brainer issue. It just takes action. And like I say, I work with the legislature every day, and agriculture is really important in the state, and education is really important, but we got to take the debate. We got to get out of the annual debate of teachers versus farmers and just get to the debate of how are we going to make this state grow, and then in that context, take that growth and make our schools great and make sure our farmers don't have to pay exorbitant taxes. But the growth has to come first. That's the chicken that has to come before the egg.
Yeah, but who's to say that if Nebraska does grow, and we do grow at a substantial rate, that the taxes are going to get any better? I mean, is that even a possibility, or how do we know that that's possible?
So if you take, I mean, all the empirical evidence shows that if you take the top highest, fastest growing states in the country, 9 out of 10, there's one exception, 9 out of 10 have been the most successful also in reducing their taxes. There is one exception, but 90% of the time.
I feel like you want me to ask what that exception is. What's that exception?
There's always a California. There's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
But,
thank you.
Yeah, California is a large part of the reason why Utah is growing so fast. Many companies are leaving Colorado or California in droves and moving to Utah.
Brian, this is Todd Duran. I just have one quick question. Should be a fairly quick answer. I know we keep moving, but you mentioned rebranding of the state a number of times. Just kind of curious as to where we're at with that, or if there's any progress being made, or where we're going with that. I know we rebranded the tourism thing here just a few years ago, but do you see that changing fast, or is that something we're just kind of starting to talk about?
Yeah, so it's both. So we've been waiting just a little bit. The Department of Economic Development and the governor had their own branding effort going on, and I think they've completed that. Now that they've completed that, they've gone back to the sort of good life branding. I'm not as concerned about what our motto is, but what I'm concerned about is what are the visuals we're sending out there about Nebraska and what it is, and we're coming out of this pandemic in a period of time where everybody, including young people, have reevaluated their lives. We've never had a time in this country where people were more concerned about quality of life issues. There's never been a better time to attract people to Columbus in my lifetime, ever. Because the quality of life in Columbus is just better than it is in Chicago, and certainly a lot better than it is in New York right now. And so my question is, what are we doing on social media and in imagery? What's the message we're sending to these young people, and about the opportunities and the kind of lifestyle that they can have? And that's the piece that needs to move and needs to move in the next 6 to 12 months.
I would agree. And I think we need to find ways to recruit those people that can now work from home,
Yeah.
bring their families, bring their spouses. There's
Yeah.
jobs here. You know, how do we get that person
Yeah.
with a high level work from home job, living in a city that they can enjoy and raise their families? So I think those are the recruiting efforts that the branding efforts can really assist with. So
Yeah,
Good
but
point.
so, you know, but we have got to move these topics up to the top of the discussion, politically, community, whatever. These just, and we have to have a sense of urgency about it, because there's a bunch of states that are already busy going down this road.
Thank you to everyone that asked questions. Brian, if people want to get the tax nerd side of you, how can they reach out to you? Or how would you like to move forward with that?
Nobody ever reaches out for the tax nerd side of me. Trust me, Dawson. But you can always get me at bslone, BSLONE, at nechamber.com.
Brian, appreciate your time today. I know Columbus continues to be a key role in the state and for the state chamber, so we'll continue to work with you and your state chamber team, and we thank you for being here today.
Sounds great. Hey, Dawson, thanks and good luck. This is a tough crowd you're working for, so, you know, keep your game face on.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian.
Take care.
With that, I will turn it over to Ken to introduce our 2021-22 chair.
Very good. And before I do that, thank you again, Brian. You're a great supporter of the state and great supporter of business throughout the state. So thanks for supporting this event. And at this time, it's my privilege to turn the gavel over virtually to our new chair, Chad Van Cleve. Chad is the CFO, Chief Financial Officer for Columbus Community Hospital. Born and raised in Nebraska, attended Wayne State, joined Columbus in 2010, lives with his wonderful wife and 2 kids. He's a member of the 1C Church, involved in that church, been a teammate's mentor, been involved in Leadership Columbus, and coaches everything I think his kids probably are involved in, which is tremendous. So he has a bucket list of a lot of travel and doing great things. On his bucket list is to help make this community stronger. So it's my privilege to turn the gavel over to Chad.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate it. Apologize I can't be there in person. Again, I'm up here in Sioux Falls, as Brian had mentioned, another great city. I do know that Dawson has what we call the Chairman's Award. And before he hands that to you, Ken, to say the least, this was an interesting year as the chairman. I think we may have to put an asterisk right next to your name, that this year was perhaps one of the most difficult for a chairman of a chamber with the pandemic and the COVID situation. On behalf of the board, we do appreciate your leadership, not just only through the pandemic, working behind the scenes, but also working with Gene on our policies, procedures, and also working on our strategic plan. Again, this year with working remote, I think it proved difficult, but I think that you definitely were able to weather the storm and emerge, I believe, ahead of what anybody expected. I want to thank you for your commitment, not only to our mission, to the staff, on how you've cared for them through this time, and also to our members in our community. I think another key aspect is your passion Your passion not only just for Columbus, the business and our citizens, but also growing this great city. So again, you've been an excellent leader to watch and follow this past 3 years that I've been on the chamber. Personally, what I admire about you most is your willingness to step in, roll up your sleeves, and really jump in and lend a hand whenever asked. And again, I believe personally that's what makes you as a great leader, at least for me personally. I do want to thank you for your service, and I do look forward to working with you this next year. So again, thank you, Ken Curry, as our outgoing chair, and Dawson, I'll let you do the handshake for me.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Dawson. Thank you all. It has been a privilege, and it is a privilege being in this town and calling this community home. Been involved in all kinds of things. Had a lot of visions of grandeur for last year, but hey, things happen. Hey, by the way, Weber Insurance, there used to be a sign out there that said things happen. And they just were awarded 70 years. But thank you, Dawson. Welcome. With that, I'm out of the way. Yes, and now Chad, the meeting is yours.
I think Brian dropped off. I do want to thank him. What an excellent presentation. I think Brian and the state's chamber really aligns with the goals that we're trying to accomplish here at Columbus Chamber of Commerce. I do want to thank our board of directors for their service. I mean, members out there have to realize they're represented. You are represented by a very talented and extremely passionate board of directors. I've had the privilege of working with several of them. They are from all aspects of business and industry throughout our city, and I'm very excited about this next year. I also do want to thank our Columbus staff at the chamber. They've remained committed and again, passionate to our strategic goals and also to our members during this difficult time. So we have a lot of great tenured staff that put in 120, I would say 130% towards our organization. I want to thank Gene Schieffer. I mean, I think that a lot of people didn't realize how much Gene changed our organization over the last 2 years. Again, working towards improving our policies and procedures and how we operate as a chamber. I think her dedication to the chamber and our mission was very important as we approach this next stage as we emerge out of the pandemic. I do want to thank Dawson for accepting the position to become the chamber president. I'm very excited about him and confident in his leadership as we move into this next year. And I'm really excited about his energy and what he can bring to Columbus, our organization. I'm very excited about the upcoming year, to be honest with you, as we emerge from the pandemic. I was hoping I could share, Dawson, if I can. I just want to share the strategic goals that we've been working on over the past year and give those members on the call an opportunity to take a look at those. I think it was interesting. One of our new chamber members, who's a friend of mine, said, I didn't realize how much the chamber was involved with. I can tell you the chamber is involved with a lot. We do offer a lot to our members. We offer a lot to our community. Our goal is to focus on the economic and business development and also to include the workforce development for our organization and our community. I think what Brian brought today was what the Chamber of Columbus has been focusing on, is to grow Columbus and make it a great place for people to want to live and want to work and want to raise their families and want to retire. And I think that's going to be what drives us over this next year. At least that's what my focus will be. Of course, the chamber will be there to support community events like Columbus Days, the Red, White Kaboom, a lot of our quality of life that you see on the slide there. But we're going to focus a lot on our community development and business development as we move forward. So with that, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, also to Dawson, our chamber president, or any board member. But I want to thank everybody for attending today, and we look forward to serving you in the next year. Thank you.